So you want to pump, huh? Yeah? You want to pump harder and faster than you do in the shower? Yeah? You want to top the damage meters? You want to ascend the throne of light and reign dominion over lesser beings? Then you've come to the right place. Hello, this is Jackaphee, and I wanted to make a quick video guide about the Ret Paladin rotation in Cataclysm for all you visual learners out there who can't be bothered just to go on Wowhead and read. For as long as I can remember, I've been a brainless, no critical thinking, driving on pure animal instincts Ret Paladin. And lo and behold, Cataclysm came out and completely reworked the class to the point where now I have to actually think of what I'm doing instead of just pressing the shiny buttons that pop in the middle of my screen. So this rework saw a massive change to our rotation, and it almost plays or functions similarly to a holy rogue, where instead of using combo points, we use holy power. When you boil down to it, the way Ret Paladin works in Cataclysm is you have certain spells and abilities that build holy power, and you have certain spells and abilities that spend them. So in between you building holy power and spending holy power, most of your time will be faced using filler-based spells, many of which are proc-related, which lends to a very fast-paced play style at times when they proc. Otherwise, it can be quite slow and highly reliant on those procs to really get going. Please fucking proc! So let's dive into these three main core components in more detail. The first bucket is holy power builders. These are the spells used to build holy power. Simple, right? The first is Crusader Strike, and it's our primary holy power builder, and it is used for single target encounters or any encounters less than 3 mobs. Casting Crusader Strike will give you 1 holy power per cast. It is absolutely the most important spell, should always be used on cooldown if you do not have 3 holy power, which is the cap. You can have 1, 2, and 3 holy power. Okay, get it? 1, 2, 3. Okay, I got it. Divine Storm is our other primary holy power builder, and it should only be used in AoE encounters with 4 or more mobs, thereby giving us 1 holy power per cast. If you use it on less than 4, you won't get a holy power. If there are less than 4 enemies, you should always be using Crusader Strike instead. By far, Divine Storm is one of the most important AoE abilities you can have, and you should always use it when you have more than 4 enemies and you don't have 3 holy power at all times. It also has a very high chance to trigger Divine Purpose. Now, Divine Purpose is not an ability, but it's rather procced and triggered from various spells. These spells are Hammer of Wrath, Exorcism, and Judgment. Now, Divine Purpose is extremely interesting because when it procs, you're able to use your holy power spenders as if you had 3 holy power while consuming none. It is a very important proc and will absolutely change the priority in which you click your buttons. This certainly adds a bit of randomness, RNG, and quick thinking to the class, which makes it very enjoyable when it procs. The next component is holy power spenders. Now, these abilities are used to spend the holy power to deal significant damage or an increase of damage over a period of time. Now, the rule of thumb, and this applies most of the time, but it's important to only spend and use your holy power spenders when reaching the cap of 3 holy power. So the first holy power spender, and by far the most important to keep active and refreshed at all times, is Inquisition. Now, Inquisition functions similarly to a rogue slice and dice, where it gives you 30% increase in holy damage. When you cap it at 3 holy power and spend it on Inquisition, that buff will last for 36 seconds. Again, do not have this buff fall off. There are occasions when you're doing your rotation that the buff may fall off and you don't have the 3 holy power. then it is recommended at that time and that time only to then maybe use it at 1 or 2 holy power in order to refresh the buff. But this only applies to this spell. Where it doesn't apply is your other holy power spender, Templar's Verdict. And this basically functions like a rogue's Eviscerate. Now, this will deal a significant amount of damage, and you should only use this when you have 3 holy power or a divine purpose proc. The last component are your filler spells. Now, these abilities are used to fill the gaps and the downtime while you're building your holy power and then spending your holy power. Exorcism is by far the most powerful filler spell. It does a damage over time debuff. It also crits automatically when the enemy is undead or a minion. You should only use this, of course, when you have an Art of War proc, or if the enemy is in range, because there's a lot of flying fucking dragons in this game. Keep in mind, it is extremely mana intensive. The next filler spell is Hammer of Wrath. You can use this during the execute phase when the enemy is below 20%, or while Avenging Wrath is active. The other filler spell is Judgment. Right? This unleashes your seals. It does a moderate amount of damage. It restores mana via communion. Now, these 3 spells I talked about, Exorcism, Hammer, Wrath, and Judgment, are the spells that could actually proc divine purpose. This is why they are prioritized amongst every other filler that there is. Because we want the divine purpose procs, we want to spend them on Templar's Verdict, or we want to spend them quickly to refresh our Inquisition if it's dropping low. The next filler is Holy Wrath. It does a moderate amount of holy damage, and it divides it amongst enemies within 10-yard ranges. It'll also stun undead and demon enemies for 3 seconds. Then you have Consecration. Now, this is actually much weaker than it was in the past. Does holy damage, of course, when you stand inside of it, and it also is extremely mana intensive. And then lastly, of course, there's Divine Plea. Now, this doesn't do damage, but restores mana over 9 seconds and actually reduces your healing done. So when you don't have any other damage spells to cast and you really need the mana, then you could certainly use this towards maybe 25% of mana remaining. So with all that said, Ret Paladin very much functions as a proc-based spell priority rotation. You 100% of the time want to keep Inquisition up and refreshed. If you have 3 holy power, you should be then using Templar's Verdict. If you have less than 3 holy power, you should be using Crusader Strike. If Divine Purpose procs and Inquisition doesn't need to be refreshed, you can use Templar's Verdict. Any Art of War proc can be used Exorcism, Hammer of Wrath, then Judgment, Holy Wrath, Consecration, and Divine Plea when you have low mana. That's it. That's the spell priority system. So there are only 2 seals that you need to keep in mind of. The Seal of Truth and the Seal of Righteousness. Seal of Truth is used on any encounter with less than 3 targets. Seal of Righteousness is used on any encounter with 4 or more. Seal of Truth functions similarly to how Seal of Vengeance did. It applies additional holy damage and applies a stacking debuff called Censure, and this stacks up to 5 times. Now, when you're dealing with 2 or 3 mobs, it actually is beneficial to apply those stacks on each of those mobs. For Seal of Righteousness, you don't even have to think. If it's 4 or more, you pop it. Now, for the spell priority, the only thing that changes, and again, this is with 4 or more enemies, is you're replacing Crusader Strike with Divine Storm. And you're replacing, again, the Seal of Truth with Seal of Righteousness. And you simply continue as normal. Now, the Divine Storm, again, only procs a holy power when you strike 4 or more enemies. So it's very important to position yourselves accordingly. Now we're talking about big dick cooldowns. Your major class cooldowns are the following: Zealotry, Guardian of Ancient Kings, and Avenging Wrath. Now, Ret Paladin has extreme burst spikes, and the windows of this burst comes from these cooldowns. So a large portion of the damage comes from using these cooldowns together. So you typically want to stack these cooldowns alongside Bloodlust. Now, of course, in some encounters, you're not using Bloodlust immediately, so it's important to time these cooldowns accordingly and make sure that they line up in the end. Now, these cooldowns don't affect the rotation and spell priority, but they will affect the frequency in which you use these spells. So Zealotry is a 2-minute cooldown, and it causes your Crusader Strikes to instantly generate 3 holy power. So you'll be actually casting Templar's Verdict much more frequently. Now, in order to use Zealotry, you need 3 holy power or a divine purpose proc. Now, when you use Zealotry alongside Bloodlust, you'll typically have a lot of haste, to which the cooldown of Crusader Strike will be close to 3 seconds. That means during Bloodlust periods, you won't actually need to use filler spells, but you can simply cast Crusader Strike, then Templar's Verdict, then repeat. And occasionally you'll be casting Templar's Verdict multiple times in a row when Divine Purpose procs. Now, Zealotry should always be stacked and used alongside with Avenging Wrath. Now, Avenging Wrath is your second biggest cooldown. It is your wings. It is a simple damage increase for 20 seconds. Now, when you use the Sanctified Wrath talent, the cooldown is reduced to 2 minutes, which aligns nicely with Zealotry, and therefore I have those two macroed together. The last major cooldown is Guardian of Ancient Kings, and this is longer. It's 5 minutes, and it summons a Guardian who will attack your current target for 30 seconds, and it provides a stacking buff that gives 1% increased strength for every attack that you and the Guardian do. Now, this stacks to a 20% increased strength. And again, Guardians should always be used together with Zealotry and Avenging Wrath, as well as other major cooldowns like Bloodlust and other buff enhancements like potions. Other active cooldowns, of course, are your on-use trinkets, Synapse Springs if you're engineering, and any potions like Golem Blood, which can be pre-potted before you start an encounter, and additionally can be used again once per fight. Now, the absolute best case again scenario is that you stack as many of these buffs as possible at the same time as your class cooldowns. Synapse Springs is a glove enchant, and it's used by engineers. It will increase your strength by 480 for 10 seconds. Now, the caveat with Synapse Springs, however, is that it cannot be used at the same time as your on-use active trinkets. So typically, as soon as the trinket buff ends, you should then use the Synapse Springs. Now, of course, the third main active cooldown are your trinkets. Typically, people will macro these trinkets together with Avenging Wrath, and I personally macro the trinkets, Avenging Wrath, and Zealotry together, because I'm an idiot. Now that we've talked about the spell priority list, the holy power builders, the spenders, your major cooldowns, and other active cooldowns you can use, let's see how we actually do this in practice. Okay, so I wanted to essentially just summarize everything that we've talked about. We looked at our PowerPoint presentation. Now let's look at this live and in action. Just quickly, major skills that we're using. Again, Crusader Strike as the Holy Builder, Divine Storm as the secondary Holy Builder. I have my Spender being Inquisition, and then Templar's Verdict fillers. My Judgment here, Hammer of Wrath, Exorcism, Consecration, Holy Wrath, again, and then the Divine Plea. In terms of major cooldowns, as you can see here, Zealotry, Avenging Wrath, Guardian of Ancient Kings. I have Avenging Wrath and Zealotry macroed. All the other macros are simply, start attack macros, just so I can just make sure that I have near 100% uptime, right? Major one button macro, my boom boom bam bam macro. I pop Avenging Wrath, I'm popping Zealotry, I'm using my on-effect trinket, and I'm using the Synapse Gloves. In regards to just some, add-ons I have dominoes for the action bars, details, we all know what that does. I'm using Move Any in order for just moving Blizzard frame rates wherever I want. And of course, Weak Aura. A very amazing Weak Aura that's helped me just get familiarized with the rotation. is the Ret Pal UI. This just displays the most important cooldowns and most important spells. And then this is a rotation or spell priority sequence. Now, you have to use this at face value. You can't just follow the list blindly and say, oh, this is the first, that means I must pop it, right? Because it is always going to tell you Avenging Wrath first. So use this as a guide, not necessarily as a de facto end-all be-all priority list. But it certainly is helpful for you to say, oh, this is procced, you know, Avenging, you know, the Hammer of Wrath procced, or the Exorcist procced. I should use this if the Crusader Strike is not available as a filler. So it is an extremely helpful weak aura, and I will put this in the description link below. Another great weak aura that I have active, of course, is the Holy Power. Looking here, to me, fucking sucks. Everything for me, everything happens from a gameplay perspective in the center of the screen, and that's where I like my information. So this is where I keep the Ret Pal UI. This will only be shown in combat, and then of course Holy Power, which fits nicely in between. So this is the information. This is everything I'm going from. Ideally, of course, your keybinds and where you have everything organized is intuitive for you. There's no point in me sharing what I prefer Crusader Strike to be on, or where I prefer Avenging Wrath. To me, it makes sense. You know, Judgment is on mouse 4. I'm throwing it forward. You know, to me, Crusader Strike is used the most, so it's 1. Avenging Wrath is my middle mouse button click. It's going to be, it's not going to be relevant for you. Follow your own keybinds. Follow what you're most comfortable with. From a talents perspective, it's on Wowhead, guys. Surveillant is probably the best Ret Paladin theory crafter in the world. Certainly a lot fucking smarter than me. Much of what I shown today was based on that and Icy Veins and just my general gameplay experience. So thank you to those creators for spending all that time simming and theory crafting to make us pump. I will put the talents and glyphs in the description below. Based on an opener perspective, right, we want to make sure our Retribution aura is on. We want to make sure we have Blessing of Might. And we want to make sure if it's a single target encounter or less than 3 mobs, we have Seal of Truth. Okay? That should be your starter. You know, you can create a weak aura or a tell me when add-on to make sure that these are constant reminders for yourself if you need it. One quick note too, of course, you're going to make sure you have your food buffs and your flasks, right? All the other raid buffs on before pull. That's self-explanatory. So the opener, again, is mostly the same, in which you are pre-potting. You're going to put your nitro boots, right? So you can blast there and hit the ad as fast as possible, or the boss as fast as possible. And Judgment, if you don't have boots, immediately, in order for you to get that increased movement speed by 50%. Now, depending on when the guild is going to lust, is when you're going to pop Guardian of Ancient Kings, in my opinion. Now, ideally, if lust is happening 2 minutes after the encounter starts, then you can pop Avenging Wrath and Zealotry at the start. Wait for the lust period, in which then you can pop all 3, including, of course, on-use trinkets and your potion, because you'll have pre-potted it, so you can use the potion a minute later into the cooldown. So it will depend on your lust period. But let's assume most guilds, of course, are lusting at the start. Give or take, of course, right? Give or take Magma. Give or take, you know, Omnitron, right? There are periods where that changes. But we're assuming you'll be starting the encounter with lust. With the lust periods, again, this will fall closer to 3 seconds, so you won't have time for a filler. So with lust periods, you'll be simply doing Crusader Strike, Templar's Verdict, Crusader Strike, Templar's Verdict, when, of course, Zealotry is up. Guardian of Ancient Kings, there's some fights in which may go longer than 10 minutes, I'm not sure. But on the second, for the first Guardian of Ancient Kings, it'll be as you approach the boss, prior to Zealotry and Avenging Wrath, because you're hoping for that increased stack of 20% while the Zealotry and Avenging Wrath pop. We're fishing for Divine Purpose procs so that we can get to that 3 Holy Power immediately so that Wings and Zealotry can be popped at once. Now, for Guardian of Ancient Kings, you're going to be using that prior to the pull, right as you're engaging contact. So, what I'm hoping to do here, right, let's do a pull 15. We got our buffs active, right? I'm going to pre-pot before it hits 1, so I can use the pot again. I'm going to use my Nitro Boots to get in with Judgment if you don't have it, and popping Guardian of Ancient King at the top. All right, pot, go. Yeah. That can happen, apparently. Using the Nitro Boosts. That for sure would fuck it up. That'll fuck up your opener, but let's try this again, shall we? Alright, again, Seal of Truth, Blessing of Might, Retribution Aura's up, right? Let's do a pull 15. Okay, again, we're trying to fish a Divine Purpose proc so we can bust these out all at once. Guardian of Ancient Kings, prior, as you're approaching the target. Pre-pot, of course. 3, right? 4, 3. I'm going to click my pre-pot. Wings in. Judgment. Cast Guardian of Ancient Kings. Now I'm going through. I'm trying to fish for 3. Come on, give me 3. Can be very slow at first. We're not doing Inquisition yet. We want to try to rush for. Now we pop everything. Inquisition. Templar's Verdict. Crusader Strike. Templar's Verdict. Now, you're going to do Hammer of Wrath if you don't have Lust, or you're just going to do Crusader Strike, Templar's Verdict if you do have Lust, right? Templar's Verdict. Wrath in this case. Proc. There we go. Big damage right here. See? Now, again, we have Inquisition up. It's coming down though. So we're probably going to want to refresh that now, right? Yeah, we're going to want to refresh this on this one. There we go. Now refresh. There we go. Divine Purpose proc, Templar's Verdict, and your fillers. And that's it. That's all there is to it. As you can see, Divine Plea, because I'm low on mana, as a filler, and that's it. That is the core rotation. It's as simple as that, boys and girls. As you can see, this is extremely helpful just to look at procs, and it's by and large mostly what I'm using. Refresh Inquisition. Shit, I should have used Crusader Strike there. And you get it. Now, obviously, you're also a paladin. You may be bopping, you know, protecting yourself from damage, freedoming people, lay on handsing your tanks if they're low, right? Do your normal paladin shit. You know, at some cases, you may be low on mana, and your healers don't give a fuck about you, like in me case, pop a Word of Glory, right? For a heal. And then practice certainly makes perfect. But that is the general opener. Now, there are no dummies here that have 4. Did this hit everyone? No, it doesn't. So yeah, again, with AoE situations where there's 4 or more mobs, you'll be swapping to Seal of Righteousness. You want to get into a position. Sometimes, right, adds aren't always stacked at the start. You want to kind of position yourself where you will hit all targets. In this case, there are no scenarios in which the dummies are that close. Ideally, too, like if you're in a speedrunning guild or someone that knows the fights and they're pulling fast, what you can do is have someone bring a mob for you to then stack 3 on the get-go. That way, you're rushing in with 3 holy power immediately and can pop Avenging Wrath and Zealotry immediately without worrying about a Divine Purpose proc. Even better, if you're really fast, I mean, you could have Inquisition up, right? And you have an extra mob, and you stack up to 3, right? There you go. You have 3 pre-pot, boots, judge, you know, Ancient Kings, Zealotry, Avenging Wrath, and then you're really off to the races at this point, right? Oh wow, big. See, as you can see, he's very procky. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. And then here you can see your You're firing. Inquisition then just got up. And you're off to the races here. Apologize for this. One thing I did forget to add. Obviously, the trinket, as you know, was procced. It's on my Avenging Wrath, right? So I'll leave this up to show. One thing I didn't touch on, though, was the synapse springs on the gloves. So again, this cannot be stacked immediately with your trinket. So there is a delay. If you watch down here, this is where this will be. I won't have a Guardian of Ancient Kings for now, but right, Judge, Crusader Strike, right. We're waiting for the Divine Purpose proc. We're getting to 3. No, it's not Inquisition yet. There it is, Inquisition, right. As you can see, the trinkets. The trinket is with my Avenging Wrath and Zealotry macro. Right, but Synapses I can't use yet. See the cooldown there? So I'm waiting until it's done, and then I'm proccing it, right? And that way you can have both active. Should have forgot about showing that on the first go, but there it is. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention, of course, was engineering, like the Global Thermal Sapper Charge, as well as Big Daddy. Now, Big Daddy has a cast. It also does more damage when the mob hasn't been hit before. Obviously, that's going to be, you know, right when adds spawn in an encounter. You may want to hit this off. But this can be used in tandem for some pretty big damage from off the rip. The Global Thermal Sapper Charge, you can see, can be used a minute later. But that is an instant AoE. So I typically use that as well on even single target encounters. You may see a very slight DPS increase. So those two are what I use from an engineering, you know, grenade perspective. Hopefully that covered everything. Again, I'm new to Kata. I'm new to this Holy Power rotation. There must be some shit I'm doing wrong. So please leave some feedback and comments on anything that could help me improve, or others that may be watching this video. That'd be very helpful. Thanks very much, guys.